Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of The Curious XX. This podcast is all about inspiring young women to explore and embrace careers in STEM. Through The Curious XX, we'll bring to you stories of strong, dedicated women who are making a difference in these fields, and along the way, we'll dive into some fascinating scientific concepts too. I'm Adya,
And I'm Dia.
and we couldn't be more excited to kick off this journey with someone very special to me, my cousin, Dr. Ankisha Gupta. I've grown up calling her Asha Didi, so that's how I'll be referring to her in today's episode. Asha Didi has been a huge source of inspiration in my life. We come from a conservative Indian family where our mothers and women before them have not typically pursued careers. Asha Didi is the first doctor in our family, and she has broken barriers to follow a career that she is deeply passionate about. Every conversation I've had with her leaves me feeling more curious and more motivated, and I hope you'll feel the same today. Asha Didi completed her MBBS at JSS Medical College in Mysore with distinction throughout, and she is currently specialising in radiodiagnosis at Kasturba Medical College in Manipal. She is 6 months into her residency now, and I cannot wait to see where her journey takes her next. So let's dive in and hear from the incredible Dr. Ankisha Gupta.
We're so excited to talk to you today. So just to start, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what really drew you to the medical field in the first place?
Thank you for having me here. I grew up in a small town in India, so comparatively not much exposure and not really people around you to look up to because, as Adya mentioned, our mothers never really worked or had a career of their own. And I always wanted to be something or be someone on my own and have my own identity. Um, as for how I got into this field, I always was into reading, a nerd if you want to call it. And since the beginning, I used to be inspired by a lot of authors. I read up a lot of Arthur Conan Doyle, Agatha Christie, Enid Blyton while growing up. So I was always into reading. And given that medicine is a reading intensive field, including radiology specifically, it seemed like a natural choice for me to take it up.
That's really nice to hear how you got into radiology. So for the people who are watching this who aren't really from a medical background, could you please explain a little bit about what radiology is and how it's like different from other medical specialties?
I can understand that because radiology is not one of the most clinical branches, or it's not in the forefront of the clinical medicine that you hear about. So it's not the medicine or the surgery that everybody's into when they hear about becoming a doctor. So it's somewhat like being a Sherlock Holmes in medicine. As I said, since I was a lot into reading thrillers and solving mysteries, it's somewhat similar to that. So it's about solving medical through images, so CT scans, X rays, all the MRIs. We look at the images and tell you what is happening inside the body without actually cutting you open. It's more about brains than actual bronze. So that's what radiology is all about.
That's great. So I understand why you were drawn to the medical field, but was there something specific about radiology, like a moment or an experience that really drew you to that particular field? Or, was it a consistent interest over time?
Um, Not really a consistent interest over time, but more of a sudden thing because being an introvert, it's difficult to interact in the medical field because interacting with patients, it takes up a lot of your energy. And once during my internship, when I was posted in radiology during our rotations, so that is when I realized it's a perfect balance of staying in your own lane, having your own space, and at the same time doing what you love. And also the added thing with the puzzles and being able to interact on your own terms gave me the freedom to choose this field.
That's amazing. So, what's your favorite part about radiology so far?
So, if you guys have heard of the book Where's Waldo? So, basically, radiology is like a high stakes version of it. We try to find things which others oversee, being a tiny fracture or like a tiny abnormality which you cannot really predict on clinical examinations or which the patients can't really express. We try to find those things, and that is really fun, being able to see or being able to notice what others can't. So the things which others are not able to see, and to explore things and to be able to change the course of direction of treatment and the diagnosis in a patient without actually cutting open the patient is something which drew me to the field and is keeping my interest in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So now that we've understood what like excites you about radiology, we want to know what your current residency in radiology involves and what you're working on right now.
Okay, so of course, since I am in radiology, so it's a lot of screen time, not the fun kind, not with the Netflix and the music, but a lot of us sitting in front of the screen, scrolling through X rays, endless CTs, endless MRIs, and just looking through those images on repeat. My typical workday is around 12 to 16 hours with duties in the middle of it. I'm on call almost once or twice a week. So that does become a little hectic, but I chose it, so I knew what I was getting into before coming here, but it still takes quite a while to adjust. Currently, my regular day, academic day, involves a few hours working on the scans, setting up the reports, discussing it with the clinicians or the senior staff, and of course, trying to stay awake throughout. And also a lot of help from Google just to understand why I am giving the reports on what it is about. And in the middle of it, if I do get time, I eat.
Great. Thank you for being, so honest about your schedule. When we talked before, you mentioned a project using new MRI sequencing for spine imaging. So just for our viewers, can you outline your thesis project in simple terms for us?
So, as being a postgraduate resident, we are all supposed to pursue a thesis topic for the 3 years of our residency here. So, my topic particularly is focusing on spinal imaging using MRI, and specifically in that a special sequence called the 3D ultra short echo time sequence. So, basically, this sequence can be we can understand it through the concept of a super camera. It picks up things, it picks up images, it picks up the tiny details that the normal MRI sequences are not able to. So, what we want to look at is the tiny changes in the spine and the bones and the cartilages that usually we miss when we are looking at it through the normal MRI sequences. These changes are what lead to chronic back pain and neck pain in people. So, the goal is to find these damaged end plates or the cartilages earlier and more accurately so that we are able to treat and diagnose it before it becomes a bigger issue.
That's really interesting. We'd love to learn more about your thesis project later. So, moving on, what general challenges do you face in your field as in radiology, and perhaps with relation to the technology that you use, or in relation to work-life balance or anything else?
Um, as I mentioned before, radiology is a very reading intensive field. So sometimes that does get overwhelming because there's a lot of information that you need to know about. It's not just one field, which is radiology. You need to know about the anatomy to medicine to surgery to obstetrics and gynecology to everything. It encompasses multiple fields, and in addition to knowing your own field, which is radiology, we have massive inputs and amounts of data that we need to keep up with. And at the same time, tech never stops, so it is ever evolving. And basically, you can equate it to running a marathon on a treadmill. Like, you're always trying to catch up, and just when you think you have caught up, there's something new which will be thrown in the middle of it. But as I said before, it's interesting. Maintaining a work life balance is a little difficult as residents because we are expected to manage everything in this hospital since we are the primary workers, health workers you will meet on the field. So it does get a little difficult to maintain that balance, but it does get better in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that your experience will improve. And like you said, your passion is what is driving you to do this career. So, radio diagnosis, like many STEM fields, still has a gender imbalance, right? So, what has your personal experience been as a woman in a male dominated field?
It can be exhausting sometimes because you have to fight for just existing, just taking up space. You have to speak a little louder to be heard at the same pace as your colleagues are. But lucky for me, I have really good people to look up to. Like, for example, my ex head of department, she has been in the field for 20 years and she has worked really, really hard. But it has been a tough task for her. But at the same time, having supportive mentors, both men and women, who encouraged me to be here, to speak up for what I want, and to fight for my own space is worth it. But at the same time, it does get a little difficult because you are not considered up to the mark and to be able to heard at the same platform as your colleagues are, your male colleagues to be specific. It does get a little challenging because they are given that respect without ever speaking up for it, and we have to earn that respect, which is a bit unfair, but in a country like India, it exists.
Yeah, and as you shared that your male colleagues sometimes get more recognition, we wanted to ask if there were some specific instances that you've noticed differences in how male and female radiologists or just doctors in general are being treated by either your peers or your patients or faculty members.
So for our patients, since this is a not a very big town, it's technically a smaller town in India where I'm working at currently. So the patients are more used to interacting with male doctors. So anytime they have an interaction with me, it's already always, almost always referring to me as a sister or a nurse. Huge respect to them, but it is diminishing my work that I've done in the past few years. And as for a doctor, no matter how casually they are dressed, they are always addressed with more respect than I ever am. I'm always referred to as younger doctor, or maybe somebody who they can just ignore. And whatever I say, it's always has more weight to the word if it is repeated by a male colleague of mine. And I have experienced this multiple times in the 6 months that I have worked here. But at the same time, um kudos to my male colleagues. They try to stand up for us, but at the same time, it gets a little difficult to explain to the patients who have been ingrained with years and years of misogyny, who do not understand the concept of female doctors.
Yeah. I think that there are people who are working to change the face of these different medical fields. So, in your opinion, what is one aspect of medical education that you could change to better support women in your field?
Mentorship programs, the idea that women can be enough and they can manage everything all at once. And the thing is, we need to give them the chance to, specifically in clinical years. Usually, in fields like radiology, surgery, you won't see a lot of women because we are expected to handle the housework first. And the thing with radiology and surgery is we require long hours, long training hours. So it's usually considered non like we are not enough for it and we won't be able to give it time in the future. So basically, better training, better mentorship, better empowerment, and making them understand that we can do it and it's not something that should be allowed. It should be a choice. And more visibility in higher academic and leadership roles for women.
Yeah. It was really nice hearing about your experiences about being a female radiologist, and I think it's very inspiring to hear other women like you being in this field. But now we want to move beyond just women in STEM, and we want to ask you more about your advice and your inspiration. Um, Currently, a really big thing in the world has become AI. And I know that AI is impacting medical fields as well. So this is personally my favorite question. How do you see AI impacting radiology in the coming years? And is it already something you have encountered during your training?
Wonderful question, by the way. AI is something that has been used both as a friend and foe, specifically in my field, because 5 years back we were told that AI is going to take up all our jobs and we won't have a field known as radiology in the future because AI would be replacing us completely. But as you can see, it's not true. We are still there, more in demand now than ever before. So, what I think personally is AI can be a wonderful assistant to us. and it can make our job faster, more efficient. It can speed up reporting and can reduce the mental fatigue that we go through. But I don't think it can replace us completely, because it cannot replace the clinical intuition and the human touch that we provide. You can equate it to having Google Maps, I guess. It helps your navigation. It can show you alternate routes, but at the end of the day, you are the one who has to drive there, and you have to reach there. So AI can be a wonderful, wonderful help, a wonderful, wonderful assistant, but at the same time, it cannot replace what we do, and it cannot completely replace, because there are so many anomalies that we go through every day, which AI cannot predict and AI cannot overrule.
That's great. That's a wonderful analogy that you've used to describe that. So we have to ask you, if there's one piece of advice you could give to young girls who are looking to pursue these STEM careers, what would it be?
Um, if there's one thing that I could say to everybody is dream bold, dream big. Don't let the four walls of your room limit you anytime soon. Whether you want to be a researcher, a scientist, go into engineering, or become a doctor, it is just go for it. There's nothing that you need to worry about. And the thing is, you don't need to know everything before you start. It's a huge, it's a hill. You don't need to know everything before you get into it, and you will get there. It can be intimidating because it's often made to look like a world of, people wearing spectacles and working really, really hard, and they're already being portrayed as the smartest people on earth. But that's not always true. Everybody starts somewhere, and curiosity is, I think, the most important thing that a person needs to have. Curiosity, persistence, and willingness to learn. Like, you need to be open to ideas. You can't be rigid about your thinking, or uh, you can't let yourself or the world around you limit yourself. Always don't wait for opportunities to pop up. Seek them, and volunteer for everything that you can see around yourself.
And this is the last question that we have for you today. Um, Lastly, what are your future plans and where do you hope to take your career?
Since my residency is 3 years long and I'm 6 months into it, so I have quite some time left to go. But after that, I'm hoping to pursue some fellowships, maybe in India, maybe in Singapore, regarding neuroradiology in specific, because that is something that interests me. And maybe even in the field of musculoskeletal imaging, because I am pursuing my thesis on the topic of spinal imaging. So that is something that I really want to see where I can go. And this field is endless, so I'll just see where it takes me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. I think that you've really given a very authentic perspective to what it means to be a woman in a STEM field. And I think that what's really come out is that, it's a lot of hard work. It's just sheer hard work, staying up late nights, being underrepresented in some cases. But if you have a passion for it, if you're just doing what you love, then it's worth it at the end. I really found what your thesis project interesting. So the detection of abnormalities that can't normally be seen with normal MRI imaging, and the implications this can have in chronic diseases, like you said. I think that's really interesting. We're really excited to see what you can do with that. I think that your advice to speak a little bit louder, especially for women, is really important. And it's a sad reality nowadays, but that's just what people have to do. And we're working to change the face of STEM, as you said, through mentorship programs. What you said about AI as well, very intriguing. How you emphasize that AI won't eradicate the need for experimentation or human driven research, right? Because it doesn't have that human touch that we have, but it will instead make our work more effective and emphasize the need for human driven research. Finally, your advice to dream bold and dream big is so spot on. And we're really, really excited to see where you go on this journey. And, it was lovely to speak to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really impressed by the two of you. The questions were wonderful, and the interest you guys have in science, I hope it does not dim down, because it's amazing, and science needs more women like you. Young women showing interest in this field is what the world needs currently.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really great to be here.